But that's the effect you want to get. If you want to accomplish the Sheridan style look, you want to have your shading not flattening out the whole leaf, but rather leaving these raised areas in between. This tool number, by the way, I think is number 368. It's just a regular old craft tool. It does a great job. The rest of these smaller leaves are all done like you normally would, although the large leaf here, they get treated a little bit differently. Let me show you how we shade that. I'm going to use a smaller pear shader here, and it's just a typical pear shader. I think the number on it is 234. And with this, again, we're going to create the raised ripple edges to help give 3-dimension. But when we do this, we're actually going to rotate it and angle it so that when we start out at the end of these swells, you notice that we taper it out and curve it a little bit so that it looks like it flows into that center stem that's running up the middle. This, again, helps to give some nice 3-dimension to it. And that's how these leaves get treated with the shading. You see how it already is starting to give us some nice 3-dimension to the leaves. You notice how this leaf also has that same rippled edge, and the way that I put that shading in there is I used a tool, it's number 234, and it has the same vertical lines on it that that longer one did. And when we use this tool, we use it just a little differently. We still walk it along, but we need to kind of angle it. We start out at the edge of the leaf, and then as we move toward that stem in the center, we kind of angle it a little bit so that we get that bit of a flow. So it looks like everything's kind of pointed toward that stem in the center. See how we have that nice ripple along the edge, and we have everything looking like it points toward the center of the stem. That's what you want to accomplish when you're doing these leaves. On some of these leaves, like this one here in the corner, we want to accomplish the same kind of thing we did with the flower petals, where we have kind of a raised area in the center. So we'll work in the two areas out at the end, but we'll leave that area in between kind of raised up. There's lots of these little leaves. They all need a little bit of shading in them, so be sure you get all of them. Our shading is complete now, and you can see that this piece of leather has a lot of color in it. You can also see that now the leaves and the flower petals all have a lot of contour to them as well, starting to give us that 3-dimensional look. The next step will be doing some beveling. In the world of Sheridan Style Carving, when it comes to the beveling, they have some tools that they give different names to. For example, one of those is called a leaf liner. And basically all it does is it puts diagonal lines in the beveling along the center stem running up the middle of a leaf. The tools that I have in my set are some diagonal bevelers. They come in a pair. They're number B202L and 202R, and they do exactly that. They put diagonal lines on in your beveling as you do it. So we're going to take this tool and we're going to use it along this stem of this leaf here, so that we get those diagonal lines. This helps to add to the depth. We had the pear shading slightly angled so that it looked like it flowed down into this stem, and now we have these diagonal lines coming off of that stem, and it really gives us a lot of depth. It really looks like this leaf has a lot of depth in the center of it. Switching tools, we'll use the one with the diagonals running the other direction, and we'll do the other side of this stem. You can see how that gives that leaf just a whole lot more depth. Once we've used the leaf liner, the diagonal type bevelers on the stem of the leaf, now it'd be time to go around and do the petal lifting. And there's a couple of ways that this can be done. The Sheridan Style Carvers use, well, they call them petal lifters. They're really, we call them undercut bevelers. This is what they look like. They're bevelers with a bit sharper angle to them. They have actually almost a cutting edge onto the tip of them. There's two sizes, and this design we're working on will actually use both sizes of that. There's a larger one that works in these larger scalloped areas, and the places that you use a petal lifter or an undercut beveler would be in these openings in between the pear shading. When you have these leaves with the scalloped edges and the flower petals, we would use this tool to dig underneath the leather a little bit, and it actually kind of even lifts it a little bit. That's where it gets its name, but it actually lifts up the leather in here, and it gives us even more 3-dimension in our carving. We do it at this point because you can see that we leave some heel marks. We leave some tracks in the leather where we use this, so we'll come back when we do our regular beveling and we'll clean that up. The smaller tool would get used on these tighter scallops, like on this flower here. We would come into these places like this, lifting up that little piece of leather in between the pear shading there. And then if you don't have those tools, let me show you another way that you can accomplish this same look. You'll notice that I've beveled a portion of this flower already, and that's so I can show you how to use this tool. This tool is called a deerfoot modeler. It's also called a pro petal or a petal lifter. I've heard it used, all of those things. And you can see this also has a very sharp angle to it. It's been brought to a pretty good point. And I actually even strop this tool with on the jeweler's rouge, just like I do my swivel knife, to maintain that edge. So, and I've already done that, but I wanted to show you, you have to maintain any of these cutting tools. But the way this tool gets used, we take the point of that tool, and again, we come into these areas where the in between the pear shading, and since this has already been beveled, what I do is I actually start out with the cutting edge right at the bottom of the bevel, and I cut underneath, and I like this because I can actually even pick it up a little bit. I can actually cause that leather to lift a little. You can see how that gives even more dimension to the edges of those tools, to your flowers. But use whatever you have. Both of those techniques help to bring out more 3-dimension in your carving. and they both are very easy tools to use. It's time to begin the general beveling of this piece, and let me explain something about Sheridan Style Carving again. If you talk to those that do a lot of it, they would try to tell you you need special bevelers to do this. I've never found that to be necessary. I use the basic bevelers that I've always had. They're checkered texture. I usually use about 3 sizes. What I have here is a 936, 701, and a 702. And they'll do all of the beveling on this. The reason that they like to use a sharper angled beveler is because often, and we have on this design, many lines that run very close together. And for example, when you're beveling this line here, if I were to use the full impression of this tool or had it leaning much, it's going to mash the line down directly behind it. And I learned a long time ago that all you have to do to change the angle of the bevel on your tool is, as you get to those tight places, just lean the beveler forward a little bit. That changes the angle of it and gives you basically the same effect that they have with their steep angled tools. You'll need the smaller bevelers to get into the tight turns and such that we have along the leaves. So you will need a couple of sizes, but using a larger beveler like this helps to speed up your work. You have lots of beveling to do, so be sure to take your time and get every line beveled real clean. Here's what our project looks like with the beveling completed. You can see that we have some real 3-dimension now. One of the things you want to be careful with Sheridan Style carving or any type of carving, and that is you have a lot of the interlacing of the design. You have parts running underneath other parts and so forth. So the direction of the bevel is very important. You want to pay real close attention to how your pattern flows to make sure that you get that correct. But we're ready now to put some of the details into the carving.